Hey everybody, it's Doug Green and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News, and I'm here with my good friend Jerry Christensen, who's the associate founder of ICA AI. Jerry, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, it's great to be here once again, Doug, and today I'm going to be speaking about probabilistic versus deterministic AI. And as you mentioned, I'm representing ICA AI as their associate founder. And I think this is a really interesting topic because people are bombarded with this and that about AI. There's all kinds of different things to consider. But one thing that people don't often hear is that there's this different method to use AI, this deterministic method that doesn't rely on the same infrastructure that most AI does. And we'll drill into that a little bit deeper. And I've actually got a diagram to share with folks as well that I think will be helpful.
We're going to pull that up right away, and we'll also share with everybody. I'll share with everyone now, by the way, that we'll put the link up. If you want to go deeper into this topic afterwards, there's also the article we're going to be referencing up on the website. But before we dive into all that, first of all, Jerry, what is ICA AI?
Yeah, so ICA AI is a company, and as is being displayed on your screen there, it's ICA space AI. The ICA part stands for an Intelligent Communications Assistant. That's where the acronym comes from. ICA AI, or ICA AI is how we pronounce it. So we have, as I just said, a solution that is an AI-based Intelligent Communications Assistant. It supports outgoing calls. So you could do things like call Doug, and it will use my spoken voice to transcribe that into a command that'll call you if you are in my contact list. Perhaps equally important, or maybe even more important, it handles inbound calls. And so what it'll do is it'll see if I'm getting a call from a number that it recognizes and it trusts, somebody that I've done business with perhaps, or a colleague, and it'll allow those calls to go through. That's actually part of the conversation we're going to have today, is determinism as a means of doing that. And so the whole idea is that it kind of filter the unwanted calls, like robocalls that you don't want, and allow colleagues, friends, and family and trusted businesses to actually come through unimpeded. So that's what ICA AI does. And we're at our foundation is we are a technology company and an infrastructure company, and we are actively licensing the use of the solution to pretty much anybody that would want it. But most notably, carriers is the typical audience for this. It could be a UCaaS provider. It could be an MVNO. We were at that event in Miami. I think I might have mentioned that to you on one of the other podcasts. So we saw a lot of interest from mobile virtual network operators to differentiate their offering from the underlying MNOs. And so, yeah, Doug, that's what we're all about.
All right, and let's actually take a look at that image and get right into the heart of the topic here.
Yeah, let's do that.
There we go.
So this image, which admittedly was also created with AI, although I'll reiterate something that you and I talked about, Doug, before we started this session, is that I think it's really important for people that use AI to use your human brain as well. Don't just, it's the proverbial garbage in, garbage out. If you put something in there, you may not get what you expect, or you might even get hallucinations, things that are just plain wrong. And that's actually one of the things we're going to talk about here. It actually says that on the left-hand side here, is that when you use deterministic AI, there's virtually zero hallucinations. A hallucination in the AI context means that it's something that is either nonsensical or just plain wrong. Case in point, something that I heard of, it's probably about a year ago or so now at this point. Now, AI is improving, granted, but I heard that some law firm put in some prompts about a case, and it asked for AI to spit out some case law. Sure enough, AI provided some case law. The only thing is, it wasn't actual cases. And I think this actually happened. I don't think this is just hearsay. As I understand it, the judge, in reviewing their material, realized that there was actually not a case in this instance that was actual case law, and he threw it out. And I think he actually admonished the attorneys after sanctions there or whatever. I didn't follow it, but I think it's a very pertinent point, is no matter how good AI gets, even if it reduces errors, that you as the human, you are still responsible for its use and how you represent it. And that goes beyond just simple things like is there misspellings? If you look at this diagram, I don't think there's any misspelled words on there. Tell me if there are. I looked at it relatively quickly. AI is actually getting a lot better at not misspelling things. At least my version of what I use is getting better. And contextually speaking, it's getting better at putting things together. But I got to tell you, Doug, one of the things that I have found, though, this is my opinion, I think others would probably agree with me as well, is that AI largely will tell you what it thinks you want to know. And it's all based on the prompt. So if it's kind of like a leading question, if you think about it that way, if you put in a prompt that you want some good reasons why Doug is a really good host of podcasts, it'll tell you that. But if you take the opposite approach, I doubt there's egregious things that are going to come up there, but it could probably give you all kinds of constructive criticism. You know what I'm saying? And same for me too, as an expert in AI or any other subject. So I think the point there is that you can't just trust AI verbatim. And that is what happens a lot of times with probabilistic AI. So what is probabilistic AI? Let's go there. So I mentioned this in some of our other talks, but I'm going to repeat it because this may be the only podcast that some folks see. So probabilistic AI relies on machine learning and large language models, LLMs, to create, based on a probability, an outcome, which is based on the input of the prompt. So if I was to prompt for, give me the best licensing contract that you can for licensing this product, it's going to do that. And it's going to do that based on whatever learning it's done from others that have done the same thing, best practices, et cetera, et cetera. It's also going to take hard data that you might give it to give you the best possible response. Well, it's going to do that on a probability or a heuristic basis, meaning that it's not exactly a best guess, but it's not exactly the complete truth either, and it can get some things wrong. So why is that important in communications? Well, in communications, if you're dealing with a robocall, for example, one of the things that you want to discern is intent. And so the intent of a call could be legitimate. It could be an actual business that's calling you, or it could be a deep fake. It could be, or if it's not AI, it could be a human being that's trying to defraud you or whatever. So the intent that you're looking for there is to figure out, is this legit? Is this reasonable, or is it not? Probabilistic AI will help you discern that, but it can miss things like nuances, and it can also miss important data that could be fed to it on a deterministic basis. So that's why, number one, you should not rely completely on probabilistic AI. But then also the thing I'd like to discuss, and really the main part of this discussion, is why in certain circumstances deterministic AI is not only different and better, but critically speaking, really necessary, especially for certain industry verticals like financial services, healthcare, legal, and government that really rely on privacy and a very secure environment. So that's part of what I'm going to talk about today during this podcast, Doug.
So I think we've now defined what we mean by probabilistic and deterministic. Now we're going to actually kind of go through, is it your idea maybe to talk about, like, for example, healthcare, legal, government, and so on, defense applications?
Yes, correct. As a matter of fact, that article, and if you have a chance, maybe you could pull it up and display that, because I know we displayed the image itself. That image is actually on the article, but there was an article that I wrote, I think was published yesterday on Technology Reseller, and it was on this topic, why deterministic AI is important for certain industry verticals. And I cited those four that you just mentioned. And so if you think about it, certain industry verticals where you must be secure and make sure that you don't violate privacy, where there's a lot of PII data involved, like financial services or healthcare, you would not necessarily want to use probabilistic AI for that, because if you're doing that, you're literally feeding into the model private data. Now, people will say, well, it's secure, it's not hacked, it's not going to be hacked by anybody, it's not going to be used for whatever purposes. But you have to kind of take that with a grain of salt, because we hear all the time databases that were hacked, don't we, Doug? I mean, that's like a regular occurrence these days. And so there's always the prospect of that. And if you think about it, if you're using a probabilistic model that's using machine learning to, for example, listen in on a conversation between Jerry as a consumer and Doug as a contact center person calling me to offer me a mortgage, there'll probably be a lot of discussion about PII there. You know, my phone number, the fact that I'm interested in a mortgage, where I live, maybe some vetting questions on my income, all types of stuff. And so if you're using that same method to vet to make sure that that's a legitimate call, and that's going into a large language model, who knows what might happen to that in the future. And so the argument that I have in this article is that not that LLMs are bad, not that you should never use probabilistic models, but you should limit their usage to only when it's absolutely necessary for certain industry verticals and use cases in particular. So where a deterministic approach makes a lot more sense would be, let's say the call is initiated from you to myself in that same use case. You're calling about a loan that I am potentially interested in originating with your bank, and we're having this conversation. From a deterministic perspective, rather than listening to every word and rather than taking those words and putting them into a large language model, you might want to just look for keywords that might be indicative of a threat, for example. Maybe it's not really Doug. Maybe there's certain things that are coming up. I'll just give a crazy example. Maybe if at some point during the conversation, Doug says, okay, Jerry, for you to secure this loan, you're going to need to pay a fee. And I say, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden you say, well, to pay this fee, you need to get some gift cards. You know, ding, ding, ding. I know that's a crazy example, right? That might not happen. And the bad guys are getting increasingly sophisticated. So that means of payment may go away at some point as defense, like I'm describing, gets better. But there probably would be other things, right? So rather than, for example, just using the ACH method that I have, you know, my known bank account number and the routing number to pay, you might say, oh, you need to open a new account. You know, so right. Those are the kind of things on a deterministic basis that AI could look for to discern intent in this example. And where that could also, now like that particular example was conversational. We're having a conversation, it's interactive. Where it could also be used is pre-recorded audio. Now, we know that telemarketers, both legitimate and otherwise, use pre-recorded audio. There's certain rules and regulations around that the FTC requires. That number one, you must have consent. And number two, you must say the name of the company and provide a callback number for opt-out. So those are definitely things that AI could look for is, you know, are those things there? Do they say who they are? Do they provide a callback number? But there's also some other things too. We would look for the language structure. Does it make sense the way they're speaking? Again, as AI gets better, the bad guys are also going to get better. So that's why it's kind of like a spy versus spy. Remember that from Mad Magazine when we were kids? You know, you got the spy that's wearing the black coat and the ones wearing the white coat. I think about that a lot. Right. I think that's going to happen with AI. So it's kind of like an arms race. So today, I think tools like ICA AI can easily defeat some of these crude mechanisms that are used, like pre-recorded audio to look for things like that. However, we're not so naive to think that AI is not going to get better on the calling party side. And so we need to continuously innovate to be able to discern intent. And again, this gets back to primarily a deterministic approach because it scales much better, as well as being more secure and private. It scales much better because if you have certain things that you're looking for, you don't have to hit a database and have that latency, potential latency of waiting for a response, but also you don't have to hit a database that might reside in some, you know, massive AI data center somewhere and cost a lot of money ultimately. Like right now, things are relatively cheap, but I think as people use more and more tokens, I think, of course, there'll be economies of scale, but there'll be a big cost there over time if you're relying completely on probabilistic models. So summing that all up, ICA AI has a solution that relies on deterministic AI for roughly 85 to 95% of the transactions. And that is not just some arbitrary thing that we came up with. I mentioned on 2 or 3 podcasts ago, it's based on this thing called Zipf's law. Zipf was a linguistic scientist that lived roughly 100 years ago. And about 80 or 90 years ago, he came up with this thing called Zipf's law that said that most of the meaning in spoken words is from a very small amount of the language. Roughly 5 to 15% of the spoken word has most of the meaning. And so on that basis of scientific thought, and this has been proven out by linguistics, that is the basis from a technology realization perspective of the ICA solution, which is to leverage that so that most transactions, a transaction here would be a request to talk to Jerry, for example, that we look at that information and determine, do we let that call go through immediately? Or do we maybe interrogate that call? Do we engage in conversational AI? So if we engage in conversational AI, that would be maybe ICA talking to Doug, or maybe it's ICA talking to another AI, quite possibly, if we need to do that. And if that happens, in some cases, we would need to use probabilistic AI because maybe it goes beyond the realm of the current data feed that's there. But again, you constantly innovate, you constantly update the deterministic data feed so that it can look for new keywords, new threats. This is where there could be data sharing within the ecosystem too, because we know the bad actors are always engaged in new campaigns where they are doing different things and there may be different keywords involved there. So I can kind of go on and on and on. I know I kind of meandered here a little bit, but the main thing is that there's this thing called deterministic AI that ICA uses that it has quite a few patents on, actually, that we feel is very pertinent to communications and specifically inbound call management for purposes of making sure that you speak to only legitimate, authentic entities, whether that's a friend, family, or a business, as opposed to relying on AI that we just don't think scales as well and certainly doesn't have the privacy and security that the deterministic approach has. So that's basically it, Doug. I know I kind of rambled on there quite a bit, but that's deterministic versus probabilistic.
Well, Jerry, help me connect what you've just explained very well to the MSP and telecom providers, technology resellers. How does this change the way they should sell AI to enterprises and also to smaller companies?
Well, in a long-term basis, I feel very strongly that everybody, and that's everybody you just listed, whether they are really close to the customer, whether they have a customer relationship, or whether they're a channel provider, is going to need to have an AI-based solution for consumers to do exactly what I just described, which is to be able to handle inbound calls. And I don't think that's hyperbole. I think in the world of agentic AI, it's conceivable that networks could be plastered with AI-generated calls. And that's a problem for networks, actually, to be able to deal with it. I mean, think of it as like a potential for distributed denial of service attack type of thing, is that there will be enough AI threats as well as legitimate AI use. Call centers themselves are increasingly using AI, where it's a legitimate, legal, ethical call center that's calling you, and presumptively they've got consent to call you, but they're using AI. And so you as a human being, rather than you trying to discern the intent and try to figure out, is this legit? Why not let AI do that for you?
Well, Jerry, I really want to thank you for joining me today. This has been really interesting. You've laid it out really well. Where can we learn more about deterministic AI?
Our current website, which is ICAAI.ai. I would encourage people to connect with me on LinkedIn, contact